The number of confirmed coronavirus cases in Ukraine is now over 200. Throughout this week, the country has been toughening up its restrictions, closing down all public transport except for key workers. The situation across other post-Soviet states varies, both in the number of cases and in the type of restrictions introduced. I am Maria Romanenko, and today we are going to look at the situations in Russia, Georgia, and Turkmenistan. First of all, I would like to turn to Russia, where there are more than 1,000 confirmed coronavirus cases. But it seems like the country is just catching up on strict measures, with the capital, Moscow, having only just closed its restaurants, cafes, shopping malls, and parks. The metro and other public transport are still operating. Earlier, I spoke with Mikhail Fishman, a Russian journalist and commentator who works for independent news channel TV Rain. Let's see what he had to say.
We don't know how to treat these numbers yet because we assume the testing wasn't that widespread enough yet, and so the scale of the pandemic is yet to discover. Probably the government doesn't tell everything they know, but now this case is much easier because there is no the barrier, the political factor doesn't work anymore. I mean that the vote on the amendments to the constitution was postponed already, so now we have more sort of the government has more credibility because there are no political factors. But again, we don't know what these numbers tell us. We don't know what numbers tell us anywhere because it depends on who is tested and on what occasion.
Mm-hmm. And do you know anything about testing in Russia? How easy it is to get tested? How good are the testing methods compared to Europe's?
It's probably everywhere the situation is very different, as I understand. There were problems with testing, as I understand, in Russia. Starting from today, I think 2 private companies are starting their own testing with their own equipment and medications and everything they need. So starting from, there were sort of rumors and the reports that the lack of testing was also sort of political because of what I already said before, because the Kremlin was not interested in discovering the real scale of the pandemics. But again, this is not the case anymore. So probably we're now at the verge of the start of real testing process, and we will get to some more trustworthy numbers and to more clear understanding of what is going on. You probably know that yesterday Vladimir Putin finally announced tough measures. He came out with his address to the nation, during which he postponed this national vote on the constitution, which again I think is crucial to address the threat well. And so he didn't put Russia under lockdown technically. That he didn't announce that. He announced a week off instead, starting from next week, but basically it started already today. The whole nation has a week off, doesn't have to go to work, and everything except from grocery stores and pharmacies will have to shut down, including parks and all the entertainment industry. So basically, technically, it's not a lockdown, but it sort of is. Yes, public transportation is operating, but I have to say it's also operating, I guess, everywhere, mostly everywhere in European capitals or even in New York. which is in very bad shape now, as I understand. There are also, but the mayor also ordered those over 65 people over 65 to stay at home. It's an order. So already today, as I heard, preventive checks started on the streets by the police forces. So if you can get sort of fined if you're over 85 and you're out, you can get a fine. So it's not only sort of voluntarily kind of type of lockdown. It's not. The government doesn't ask. The government tells you to stay at home if you're over 65, and asks you politely still to stay at home if you're not that old.
Do you think that this quarantine and further restrictions that might happen, do you think it can be used by the authorities to push through unpopular political decisions?
Well, some decisions are already not so popular, and it looks like a bit like half measures comparing to I don't know if we compare it to Italy, which is a nightmare as we understand right now, or other European countries, or even the United States. But the scale of the pandemic is not that high yet. So we understand that the government does, and that mostly probably applies to Moscow mayor now, they do already started their preparations to, if the pandemics will start to grow, and if there will be more sick and more deaths to come. And again, no one can say, at least I didn't hear any verifiable, trustworthy analysis that we are going to the same scenario as Italy, or it would look like more as Germany, for example. So no one knows. Probably the scale is still less, or we are late a couple of weeks. It's obvious that 1 week of this week off sort of lockdown that was announced yesterday won't be enough, so there will be more to come.
Okay, and can you tell me, like, personally, how has your work changed? Do you know if many companies are now being encouraged to set up remote working? How many people still need to go to their offices? Can you tell me a bit more of the personal and human aspect of the coronavirus?
Well, I know that many, I'd say, responsible Muscovites already started self-isolation. A couple of weeks ago, that includes me, I started to get out less already some time ago in order to help and practicing the social distancing, so it would help this to stop the spread of the virus. And many of us Muscovites did so too. For me personally, it didn't change that much. I only now can't do sports that I did before. But as I'm not staff-based journalist anywhere, I didn't have to go to the office really, so it didn't change my life that dramatically. But I know people, very many people whose lives have definitely changed a lot. We are all now practicing these online socializing and I don't know, some drinking. On weekends, some having a glass of champagne with someone through Skype or whatever, or playing some games, or just chatting. That's playing games again. That already we started doing again a while ago, and it just only started this new life.
Georgia has under 100 confirmed cases as of now, but the country has been very quick with declaring a state of emergency. I have spoken with Margarita Akhladiani, the editor at Gem News, to see how the country is coping. So Georgia was probably among some of the first post-Soviet countries to announce a state of emergency due to the coronavirus. Can you please explain what the state of emergency means for ordinary citizens?
First of all, it means that we feel a bit isolated from each of us, from the colleagues, from friends, but not from families, because the families are just sitting at home and trying not to leave the houses. And it means that there is no trains and no buses, no transport between cities, but it's still possible to use bus and metro in Tbilisi. And everything is closed, but at the same time, it's very easy to buy food because all the food stores are open and they are full of food. And it's also possible to get medical help any moment, not only related to coronavirus, but any medical help. And I actually did one trip today with one of my kids, and it was easy to get some help from dentists.
Okay, so as far as I understand, people's basic rights are not affected by the state.
Probably not. It's not mainly about rights. It's mainly about that people, so many, probably thousands already, they lost their jobs because everything is closed, because air companies, they don't, no flights, because especially microbuses, and so many people had their business with microbuses, so now they don't have anything to earn money. And all the restaurants, cafes, and many stores, everything is closed and people won't get their salaries. And so it's the biggest problem probably now that people feel after the fear that some can get coronavirus in any place. And mainly people follow the rules of isolation because of it's absolutely great job by the government and the medical staff, because everything is clear and announced and checked, and everything is absolutely clearly set. And so people, even I could see many times how people queer beyond the store or apotheke, and they are trying to keep those 2 meters of distance. So mainly this direction, though of course there are exceptions as well. But jobs, it will be it is and it will be the biggest problem probably for so many people living in Georgia.
Okay, and other than what you just mentioned, obviously there's this problem with people losing jobs. But outside of Georgia, it seems like the country's handling the crisis really well. And you've taken all the necessary measures, the testing seems to be going well. So is everything really as smooth as it seems for us?
Absolutely. So people are applauding to the medical staff and to the government, probably for the first time in years, because Georgia survived so many protests in the streets and a lot of people that were against the government, and now it's kind of just absolutely perfect organization. And Georgia was probably first, and it was in time when we had just one case, and already immediately the schools were closed and kindergartens and offices and everything. So probably the measures were taken, and maybe it will help, but only God knows, probably.
And I also wanted to ask you about Georgia's 2 occupied territories, South Ossetia and Abkhazia. How is the situation there with regards to the coronavirus? You ran an article, Gem News ran an article saying that there are no coronavirus tests in South Ossetia. Can you just explain what you know about the situation there?
As I heard, at least there were news that yesterday they brought about 100 tests to South Ossetia, but I can't check it so far, so I can't say for sure. But so far, before, there was no checks, no tests, and it was impossible to check whether they have somebody affected by coronavirus or not. But the biggest problem probably is that not only tests in South Ossetia and Abkhazia as well, but the problem is that they have just one intensive care ward, and they don't have specialists at all, somehow prepared for the situation. And they have just one lab, and lab is not prepared as well. in South Ossetia, and at the same time, Russia closed the borders and isn't going to help so much to those two territories. And by the way, today in Abkhazia, just right today, maybe a couple of hours ago, the government of Abkhazia, they announced the special situation. Though it's not so strict as somebody would expect. And today in the morning in Abkhazia, there was a big march by local people, Christians, who were praying that God would save Abkhazia from coronavirus. So it's really, situation is dubious, I would say.
And you said that Russia is not trying to help the territories. How much access? I mean, I know it's very difficult because the territories are occupied by Russia, but how is there any chance of Georgia helping them? How is there any correspondence going on between the two occupied republics and Georgia?
Georgia announced that it is ready to help in sending some tests and even express test systems, and it's ready to help with medications and with doctors, or except those who might be, because so far no cases announced officially, at least in South Ossetia and Abkhazia. So Georgia announced that it is ready to help with any means, but it was not accepted, and there was a reply from the governments of both Abkhazia and South Ossetia that they don't need it and they are going to somehow to survive themselves. And it's officially. Unofficially, it's very difficult to say so far because there is no emergency so far, and hope that there won't be any emergency. But if it happens, then probably the situation would change, and I don't know. I can't predict so far.
And also Abkhazia just seemed to have the so-called presidential elections there. That was all happening, amid this global outbreak and everywhere of the coronavirus. Could you comment on that? Was that immature, irresponsible to hold such a big event in the region?
Me personally, I had a feeling, and not only I, but many of my friends, colleagues, they would say that it was a bit dangerous to do it. And in Abkhazia, people, the government decided that no threat so far because no not epidemic situation. But people also were not so much scared, and they were coming in dozens to the places to vote, but nobody was scared. And for me, from my point of view, it's a bit irresponsible to do such elections in such a period, but it still was organized. Not so many, I would say not even anybody protested in Abkhazia, but people were mostly agree that it must be conducted. And you know that they survived half a year of very turmoilous situation because of politics, because of that their main leader of opposition, who now is the president of Abkhazia, he was poisoned, and there was attack on the presidential administration in Southern Abkhazia, and something like this. So they have survived so many months of disturbance, and probably maybe this also was a factor that somehow brought them to conduct those elections, at least now.
Okay, thank you so much, Margarita. That was very helpful, and stay safe and good luck with everything.
Thank you, and for you as well. Okay, bye-bye.
Bye. And last but not least, Turkmenistan, another former Soviet republic located south of Russia and neighboring Iran, reports that it has 0 cases. The country has introduced some strict measures and closed borders early into the start of the global outbreak. But according to media reports, some top officials moved to local resorts to escape the outbreak, and citizens also seem to be panicking, with many hoarding groceries and toiletries. My colleague Romeo Kokriatsky has spoken with Ruslan Metiev, editor in Turkmen News, to get his perspective.
I wanted to ask about the situation in Turkmenistan, specifically the drastic measures that the Turkmen authorities have taken, despite having no reported cases. Now, the simple fact that they have no reporting cases, considering the situation in the surrounding countries, makes this a little difficult to believe. Do you think this is due to a lack of technical capability, to information suppression on the part of the Turkmen government? What could be the cause of this zero number?
Well, it's what you have mentioned, the technical capabilities of Turkmenistan to identify the COVID-19. But most countries in the world, in 2019, it was even the number one country, actually, according to Reporters Without Borders, in terms of press freedom. Even if Turkmenistan had confirmed cases of COVID-19, trust me, they would not report it to the world. But the country was indeed one of the first in the world to start evacuating its own citizens from the hotspots, from China namely, and with several airplanes. A number of hundreds of citizens of Turkmenistan were brought back from China, including from Wuhan region, where dozens of Turkmen students pursued their higher education through the state program.
Is Turkmenistan part of the Chinese government's Belt and Road Initiative?
I think so, yes.
I'm just trying to understand the kind of connection here between Turkmenistan and China. We know, for example, that one of the reasons that Iran has had such a large spike in cases was in big part due to the close cooperation between the Iranian government and the Chinese government. Is there this sort of cooperation between the Chinese and Turkmen authorities?
Of course, there's one of the largest Chinese oil and gas companies has an office in Turkmenistan, which is the CNPC, Chinese National Petroleum Corporation. There's a number of Chinese citizens working in Turkmenistan, exploiting the gas fields in the east of Turkmenistan. As I said, there is a number of Turkmen students studying in Chinese universities and colleges, and there was until recently a direct air communication with China, both from the Turkmen side and from the Chinese side. So the communication between China and Turkmenistan was quite significant, yes.
So given that, it makes it very hard to believe that there are no actual cases of COVID-19 in the country. Why is the Turkmen government so set on not reporting these cases? Are they trying to avoid a panic? Is it a reputational issue? What could possibly be the government's reasoning behind this?
Well, it's all of that, actually. It's trying to avoid panic among its own population. It's also the reputational matter, because in the past few years, we had several cases when floods were in Turkmenistan. None of the local media reported about that. That's the culture of Turkmen politics. They tend not to tell the world and its own citizens, in fact, about bad things. If you open a Turkmen newspaper or start watching a Turkmen TV channel, it's all rosy. Everything is fine, life continues, and everything, of course, thanks to the government and the smart leadership of Turkmenistan.
But we know for a fact that things are not fine. Food prices have shot up significantly in recent days. Is that also connected to the border crossings, or is there something else going on that we don't know about?
The closure of borders, especially with Iran, has indeed significantly impacted on food prices in the markets. But even before closure of the border, Turkmenistan had severe food shortage. And that's because of the financial issues that Turkmenistan is facing. The hard currency income has dropped after Russia had stopped purchasing Turkmen natural gas. And Turkmenistan has two dollar rates, the official state rate, which hasn't changed since 2015, and the market rate, which is 5 times higher than the state rate. So the state purchases food like meat, chicken, etc. from overseas. Officially, they pay. They allow certain businessmen, this money conversion, currency conversion, but the amounts of foodstuffs that they bring into Turkmenistan is clearly not enough for the population, and that's why we continue to see all of those food queues in front of state grocery stores. People want to buy flour, people want to buy vegetable oil, meat. Sometimes there is shortage of eggs and sugar. But closing of border with Iran has significantly and negatively impacted the availability of foodstuffs and their prices.
Do you see the Turkmen government increasing their restrictions on movement within the country if the situation in Iran and Afghanistan gets worse?
Well, so far, I think they keep things under control. There haven't been reports on increasing of cases in Iran and Afghanistan, unlike in the US or Europe. They do take measures. They have closed or significantly limited, that would be fair to say, movement inside the country. They have shut down all of the international flights. They don't allow foreign operators, air operators, to fly into Turkmenistan. And this country was indeed, let's face it, it was one of the first countries to take such restrictive measures. And perhaps the fact that there are no reported cases is thanks to that.
And what about the Turkmen health system? In Ukraine, for example, the health system, while the government says that it is completely prepared, a lot of people are pointing out that it has certain deficiencies in dealing with a serious outbreak. Do you believe the Turkmen health system is up to the task if there do start to be confirmed cases, or if the government starts admitting that there are confirmed cases?
Turkmenistan's health system in general is very, very behind, even if you compare it to the health systems of Uzbekistan or any other post-Soviet countries. It's not for a reason that some Turkmen citizens who have the money, if they have significant health problems, they travel even to Uzbekistan for screening. They go to Turkey, to Iran, and to India. India has become one of the biggest destinations for Turkmen citizens seeking proper healthcare services. And if, God forbid, Turkmenistan sees the outbreak of COVID-19, local doctors will be completely not prepared to handle the issue, despite the fact that the head of state is a doctor by training, and he had been the Minister of Health prior to becoming president of Turkmenistan. Since I think 1997, he was the health minister of the country. But under his supervision, under his control, this entire industry, this entire sector of life in Turkmenistan was completely ruined. Yes, they do build nice and white marble hospitals. They equip these hospitals with state-of-the-art technology from Japan, from Western Europe, from the US. But it's people that treat patients. It's not the technology. And this government, this country it doesn't have prepared physicians, prepared doctors to handle the problem if the outbreak takes place in the country.
And speaking of other post-Soviet countries, I wanted to ask about Tajikistan. Like Turkmenistan, they also have no reported cases. Is this an analogous situation with government undercounting, a lack of testing capability, and so on?
I think the situation in Tajikistan is similar to what we see in Turkmenistan. It's a cultural thing. That's the culture of politics. They don't tend to tell about such things. I mean, look at the country. They have tens of thousands of migrant workers working in Russia, in other countries, in Kazakhstan. Kazakhstan has a number of confirmed cases already, and people travel back and forth. So. Plus, this country has also communication with China. There's trade, there's everything. So, to me, it sounds and it seems like the government of Tajikistan is simply not telling the truth, just like Turkmenistan.
And finally, I want to ask, what's the public mood? What's the public perception of what's going on like? I mean, you mentioned that media in Turkmenistan is not very free and they're presenting this rosy picture, but often people, especially in post-Soviet countries, don't have the highest opinion of the trustworthiness of their media, and I think in a lot of cases rightly so. How are they reacting to the outbreak in markets, in shops, at home?
Well, the Turkmen society is not very talkative on such matters. For all the years of independence, we learned to keep our mouths shut, and if people even discuss COVID-19 and the implications and everything related to that, they do it in private among the people they trust. But in Turkmenistan, in Ashgabat, for instance, there were also based on rumors, because people hear from one another. Somebody said that the prices for fresh meat have gone up, and everybody rushed to the market to replenish their stocks. And if the authorities were to decide to close the markets and bazaars, those people would have enough at home. They gauge the situation by what they see in shops, for instance. When Turkmenistan closed the border with Iran, the prices for potatoes went up. If before they were sold at 10 manats, which is roughly 50 US cents, when the situation got worse, when the border was shut, the prices doubled for potatoes, and people started to really stock so that they have enough. And the government reacted accordingly. They immediately organized import of potatoes from Russia, and basically the next morning people started to see that there was enough potatoes, and really nice ones from Russia, black, and at a reasonable price. Of course, not at prices that were before, but slightly higher. But they at least saw that the government saw that there was a shortage of potatoes, and they quickly filled up the markets.
Well, thank you very much for your time, Ruslan, and thanks for speaking to me.
My pleasure.
We have a lot more coronavirus coverage on our website, en.hromadske.ua. And now let's hear a recap of other news from Ukraine and Eastern Europe this past week.
No agreements were signed at the regular meeting of the Minsk Trilateral Contact Group on Donbass, which took place via video conference on March 26th. The sides continued consultations on the future separation of forces with a focus on humanitarian issues. Donbass security and the release of detainees were also discussed. Additionally, the controversial Consultative Council, featuring the unrecognized republics as separate entities, did not begin its work. Both Russia and Ukraine closed their borders to foreign nationals last week. However, the situation along the Russian-controlled border with the self-proclaimed People's Republics and Ukraine's Donetsk and Luhansk regions is far from under control. Allegedly, cars are still crossing from Russia to Ukraine, and bus tickets to and from are still on sale. And all of this is happening in spite of the sketchy epidemiological situation in the region. But earlier today, it emerged that the unrecognized DPR had allegedly closed down its borders to travel to Russia, as well as the self-proclaimed LPR. This is reported by users of social networks who tried to cross those borders. While there is no official information yet, a so-called DPR deputy said on Telegram that people shouldn't go to Russia without a good reason. Limitations are associated with the desire of the DPR not to spread the COVID-19 coronavirus in its territory. The attention of all football fans in Europe is drawn to Belarus. They have nowhere else to look, as it's the only one on the continent with a running national football championship. Commenting on the situation, the head of the Belarusian Football Federation said, "There's no critical situation, so we thought we'd start the championship on time."
We will be back next Friday offering an English-speaking look into the week's news from Ukraine and Eastern Europe. We are on Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube. We are here to inform, but we also want to hear what you are thinking. Got a question? Tweet at us. I am Maria Romanenko, and that's the week's news wrapped up. These days, things change by the minute, but we at Hromadske continue to provide objective news and information 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, free of charge. The media landscape in Ukraine is changing too. Here's how you can make sure that stories about Ukraine come from Ukraine.
I would like us to be heard, not only in Ukraine, but all over the world.
No bread for 3 months.
Not one, but look how many. There's bread here and there.
You are going against the God.
Of course, point number one.
Thanks for the invitation.
When will this all end?
The number of political prisoners has grown.
How can Ukraine... Good evening from our headquarters in Kyiv.